Hey, everybody. Welcome to season 3 of Patriot Games. My name is Gregg Phillips. I'm your host. For those of you that have been with us over the last couple of years, I welcome you back. I'm glad to be back. And for those of you that are new and don't know much about us, we talk about a lot of different things on here. We talk a little bit about politics, of course. We talk a little bit about technology, probably a little bit of a twist off onto some health related issues. This year, we're going to take a little bit of a different twist and turn. My experience this year, which I'll get into here in a few moments, with some health concerns, really led me to an incident that called me to be more obedient to God. And this is one of those pieces of obedience. One of the things He asked me to do, um, or called me to do, was to reach out and be more communicative with all of the things that we do. We own a number of businesses. We have some nonprofit work that we do. We have certain expertise in things like election intelligence. We have a government reform bit of expertise that is coming into play here again. And we're going to spend a lot of time this year really talking about things that really mean something. We're going to try to let you leave every single episode with not just some information or something that me or my guests think, but we're going to try to give you some, not only identify the issues that are out there, but talk about them, elaborate on them, bring in the experts, and then let you try to walk away maybe with some things that you can do about it. We're going to spend a little bit of time, a lot of time, I guess, talking about sort of AI in our world and how all of it's come into play. Most of you know we have some really big databases, and deploying AI in and around those databases has really given us some interesting insights into these giant data sets that we have, and given us an opportunity to explore some new avenues. One of the calls that I had, or a word that I received from a friend of mine, is call for me to figure out ways to better monetize the work that we have and the things that we've done and the data that we have and that type of thing. And for most of you, you know that occasionally somebody mistakenly calls us grifters. Well, Catherine and I kind of laugh about that because we're probably the world's worst at that. But the great news is we do have several very, very strong, very profitable businesses. As I said, a giant data set of information related to elections. We have another data set related to how you do government reform, and we have a lot of interesting information and guidelines that we think we can help participate in as some of the newer initiatives that the Trump administration is embarking on. Some of them relative to the big beautiful bill. Some of them just other areas that they're jumping in and working on. We're going to talk a little bit about things like DHS and ICE, and we're going to talk a little bit about Medicaid. We're going to talk about work programs. We're going to talk about how do you go about saving money in government. It's one thing to identify it like Doge did, but it's a whole other thing, as we later saw. You talk about 2 trillion. Well, the realities are obviously far different than that. And it's easy to find things and it's easy to point things out, but the actual reforms and how you go about doing that is something that we have some significant expertise in, and we're going to be sharing it here, sharing it with our friends in Congress, in the administration, and really around the country in states and places where we believe we can help really help guide some of the new projects and some of the new efforts that are going on. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about tech. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about data. But I want to spend just today, if I could, just talking from me to you. This has been a really difficult year for me. The past 12 months, when I stopped doing the podcast, or since I stopped doing the podcast, have been incredibly difficult. They've been some of the most challenging I've ever experienced. And while I never really let go of the reins of some of the work that I do, I had to let go of the podcast, and I had to set it down and turn off the camera. Some of you may, if you look back at the last few episodes from last year, you will no doubt recognize that my words were getting a little more jumbled. I was a little more confused than normal. And for those that are close to me, they'll know that I was having a little bit of some struggles with things like my eyesight and my ability to communicate with people in a manner that was appropriate. And so those my friends, my family, Catherine Engelbrecht in particular, bore the brunt of these sort of weird, angry outbursts that were mostly, we didn't know at the time, but mostly related to the cancer and mostly related to a cancer protocol that I had done. For those of you that are new, I was diagnosed first in July of 2019 with an advanced form of prostate cancer. Rather than taking a traditional path, I chose to go walk on the Camino de Santiago in Spain. It's an ancient pilgrimage. People have walked on this thing for 1,400 years. There's several different routes. The one I took was called the French Way or the French Route. It's about 500 miles from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in France to Santiago de Compostela on the north side of Spain in Galicia. And I did that while I was sick. Along the way, I had several pretty significant encounters with Satan, one in particular that almost wiped me out. I made my way back and had a couple of or made my way on the path and had a couple of very direct encounters with God where he instructed me to listen. I'm not a very good listener. I think maybe Americans in many ways aren't, but me in particular, I'm good about talking and I'm good about asking people for things, or ordering people to do things, but I'm not so good about listening. And in a very pointed way, one morning, I was walking up a trail. It was a relatively thin trail up in the mountains in Spain as it crosses over then into Galicia. And it was still dark. I'd left early that morning. And as I started out on the trail, it was maybe, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 feet wide. And the left was a, 100-foot, 5-degree hill, and to my right, of course, was up the hill. But, falling off that would have been bad. And so I'm walking along this path. It's still early morning. Those of you that have walked in the mountains know when the fog sets in, it almost feels like rain. I mean, there's so much moisture and so much dampness in the air. And you're literally walking in clouds at times that feel like fog. And that's where I was. And so I couldn't see in front of me more than a couple of feet. I couldn't see either side of me where especially to my left, where the sort of the dangerous side was, if you will. I went walking and all of a sudden my headlamp went off. And I had already sort of had this lesson from God that you need to listen to me. And so I stopped and I stood there perfectly silent, stood there probably 3,000 or 4,000 feet in the clouds, in sort of a foggy, misty kind of environment. And as clear as could be, I asked, I said, what do I do now? God, what do I do now? Do I turn around and go back? Do I just sit here until the sun comes up? What do I do? And as clear as could be, I heard audibly, just walk. And so I did. I've got pictures of me when I get to the top of this hill. There's one of the oldest communities on the Camino is at the top of the hill of Sombrero. And I have pictures of me. I got to the top of the hill, or the mountain, even before dark or even before light. It was still dark, and took a couple of pictures and whatnot. And for me, it was sort of a turning point. It was a change in me because I realized at that point that I really did need to listen. And what I later learned, and I'll get to this in just a moment, is that I needed to be obedient. And so I finished the walk up, had another few days worth of a walk, and finally made my way into Santiago de Compostela. It was a great feat, but because I had been called to do it, and because I knew I was sick, by the time I was done, I had an infection in my kidneys. The cancer had advanced a little bit, and it got pretty bad. So by the time I got back, I actually spent my first night in the hospital in Houston when I returned, and really sort of began my journey at that point, listening better than I had before. But again, for those of you that know me, you'll know that 2020, I went through a what I call a standard set of cancer protocol, where I had drugs and radiation and surgery, and I just kind of followed the standard path, and it didn't quite do the trick. And I for another year or so, I kind of bounced back and forth between different things, and finally had a doctors, not my treating physician, but a doctor say, hey, there's this thing called fenbendazole out there. Of course, everybody knew about ivermectin at that point because of COVID. But so I went through all of this during COVID. I went through trying different things and whatnot. And finally, in the summer of 2021, when everything in the world, of course, was going on with us, and we were finishing up the mules related research and so on and so forth, I was finally pronounced no evidence of disease, which is what, if you have cancer, you want to hear. No evidence of disease, NED. That was in August of 2021. By December of 2022, on Christmas Eve, December of 2022, the Lord spoke to me again. And this time it was a little more concern, a little more, if you will. And he said, he woke me up and he said, and I sat up in the bed, and I couldn't see anything, but I could hear him as clear as day. And he said, your cancer's back, but don't worry, I've got this. April of the following year, I had some scans done. And in May, I was diagnosed with metastatic bone cancer. And it had already advanced to stage 4. And I was in pretty bad shape. They offered me a couple different trials, a couple different opportunities to, in essence, extend my life, but there's no cure for metastatic bone cancer. So really, I kind of weighed the situation and thought about what these trial drugs might do to me, and I decided I'm not going to do that. Trying to think through and think, what do we need to do now? And so we tried a bunch of things. We tried some ivermectin and some combos of ivermectin and fenben and zinc, and we tried a bunch of different odds and ends. The cancer had progressed at that point pretty significantly into 2024. So for those of you who don't know, and just want to go back and watch those last few podcasts last year, you'll see that I had, even me, I think the way I looked, I mean, I could certainly see it in me. And I was struggling to walk. There were mornings I couldn't get out of bed. And the pain was pretty significant. I've never really been much of a worrier about pain. I've learned earlier in my life how to compartmentalize it, and so I was able to kind of get past it. But this was like next level kind of stuff. And as the election came around, it really began to deteriorate, and my health began to deteriorate in November-ish and December of 2024. In January of this year, Catherine and I, in earnest, really began to look for a protocol that would suit me. She got on the phone and called a bunch of folks, and there's a bunch of by now there's a bunch of different doctors around. There was a study that was done by a bunch of doctors all around, and about how to dose ivermectin in various stages of cancer, depending on how serious the situation is, much more of a dose, and then mix it with some other things, and so on and so forth. We also reached out to a couple of foundations. Of course, there's a plethora of things online on Truth Social. People they're not shy about offering their opinions about all of this. But at this juncture, by the end of January of this year in 2025, I was in pretty bad shape. I had gotten where I really couldn't do much of anything. Our businesses had begun to suffer, and it was really difficult. The thought of me even getting back on Truth Social occasionally. I mean, y'all may look back and remember there were times where I said, I'm going to be out for a while. And part of that was just me not being able to even focus long enough to make a post and to do these kinds of things. And as that began to progress, it got worse and worse and worse. I pulled out the protocol that we finally decided on, and we began a 12-week protocol the last week of January and went all the way through the first week of April. I'll share a little bit about it. I'm leery of sharing the dosages and whatnot. I may talk a little bit about that, but I'm going to just broadly talk about the protocol because everybody asks me all the time anyway. I see online that there's a lot of people that are advertising for some pharmacies and things that have these kind of drugs, and they're really sharing what they're being paid to share. I'm just telling you today that I'm not being paid by anyone for anything. It's not that we won't do that this year, but what you're hearing from me today is from me as someone who took this protocol. It has nothing to do with any sponsorship or anything from anyone. And I just urge you all to consider as you hear and listen to people talk about this and make recommendations. If you have someone that you know is sick, and you want to help them, um, don't just throw out, take apricots every day for, 47 years and you'll live. And those kind of things are just honestly when you're struggling through this and you are in stage 4 and your life seems limited by far. Absolutely. The single most important thing that people can do is to pray. And I had prayed every day. You guys know I'm on the Bible app and I do a lot of that. And I started praying when I was diagnosed in the summer of 2019. And have been on for the last 6 years every single day. As of this morning, I've been on 2,209 days in the app in a row. And it's just a blessing to me. And I've got a community on here of people that kind of limit the number of people we can follow. So I think 250 people, but I've got a community of people on here that follow me on plans, and we all pray together and we talk about scripture and we do these things. So I think they're approaching 1 billion downloads on the Bible app this year. But praying is the most important thing. And what troubles me most, I think, and maybe it's just because of my obedience and my promises to God and my willingness to not just listen, but to do than what he has shared with me that I need to do. It's more comfortable for me to go faith first. And that's how I approached all of this. And I just urge you again, if you have people close to you, friends, family, that are sick and it's advanced and things are not good and the doctors are saying there's no hope and you are stage 4 and they give you a year to live like they did with me, please pray with them and urge them to pray every day. Pray and worship and give it to God. He's there. He's listening. He wants to hear from you. He knows you don't even really have to say anything other than, Jesus, I need help. Just cry out to him. I need help. He knows what you need help with. And it hurts my heart when I see online that people just say these sort of callous things to people that are sick, that I'll send this to you, or this will make you well, or go buy this, or go sit in a copper mine for 20 days in a row and you'll get well. And I'm not saying those things aren't good and they're not right, but when it's not coupled with prayer and it's not coupled with sort of buy-in on the overall protocol, then the challenges that you will face post that, irrespective of what you take or whether you survive any longer on this dirt earth or not, that's not why we're here. The victory is in Jesus Christ, and pray that guidance and that path to that cross. And the only way to the Lord is through that bloody cross. And I just urge everyone to embrace that concept, no matter what your issues are, no matter what your challenges are, no matter what your health situation is, give it to God. You don't have to be eloquent. You don't have to be able to pray this up in a way like, these famous preachers do. There's like, wow, what makes them even think of those things? Sometimes I think that. You don't need to do that. That's not what he wants you to do. He wants you to seek him personally, and he wants you to cry out to him and just say, I need help, and he'll be there. So with that said, I would just say prayer first. Lead with Christ, and that's the single most important thing you can do for yourself or anyone else that's ill. So we put together a protocol. Funny enough, I think probably Catherine wrote this, but she wrote it as Gregg's 12-week protocol. This protocol has actually made its way around. My youngest son, John David, was in a Bible study recently, and the young man sitting next to him, they were praying. He says to John David, he says, do you know Gregg Phillips? And John David goes, yeah, that's my dad. And he said, well, you're not going to believe this, but my dad has metastatic bone cancer that emerged from prostate cancer at stage 4, and he's in really bad shape. And his neighbor my friend Bruce gave him a protocol that says Gregg's 12-week protocol. And so the most random occurrence in the world, and you know, can't happen but with God, right? And so there's now somebody else taking this protocol because of God, and because he was presented an opportunity to see and know of this protocol from a friend of mine whom has been actually that'd be that would be a little harder for me to talk about. That this person is incredibly important to me. He's been there with me through everything. He's prayed with me. He's helped me with my businesses. He's an incredibly important person. And speaking of leading with Christ, this guy leads every single thing he does with Christ. He's a very, very successful man. And his family have been not just kind and generous, but so prayer filled, directed toward me that it's really makes me almost a little weepy. But and of course, Catherine Engelbrecht. Catherine has been there literally 15 years, and I was first called to go see her, and um, and um, and I think I was originally, as God gave me the vision, just go to her, meet with her, and protect her. She was under a huge attack back about 10 or 15 years ago, and just go protect her. And I don't know what that means. Between Catherine and Bruce, the guidance that I receive from these two people and the intercession with the Lord on my behalf, and even friends that they've brought into my world, is frankly the reason I'm here. So as I read this protocol to you, just understand from where it came, that it's already extending out into other people in my circle, in my community. But this is Gregg's 12-week protocol. And again, I'll talk a little bit about the dosages, but guys, just know, do your research on this, especially with ivermectin. Do your research on the dosing. Do not do what I did without consulting some people, doctors, somebody, because this dosage was toxic. Now, it ended up helping me and saving me, or God did in providing it, but don't do what I did. I'm just telling you. All right. So with that, this is I'll tell you the dosage and the frequency, because there were some of them I wasn't doing daily. I was doing 180 milligrams a day of ivermectin. 180. That's 15, 12 milligram. And I was taking that every day for 12 weeks. It affected my eyesight, or I couldn't see, I couldn't drive, I couldn't do anything. It affected my brain in a very negative way. It made me mean and hateful, and I didn't even know what was happening. And people would say to me now, like, do you remember that time? I'm like, no, not really, but it happened. Let's see, fenbendazole, 1,000 milligrams, 3 days a week. I didn't really have any side effects from Fenben. I had taken it several other times at much lower dosages and never higher than this, but 1,000 milligrams 3 days a week. I didn't feel any effects. But again, please don't do any of this without doing your own research, contacting some doctor, physician, naturopath, somebody that can give you some guidance on these dosings. Vitamin K, I was doing that 3 days a week and taking that with the Fenben. Vitamin D, I was taking a lot of vitamin D, which is also can be toxic to you. So don't take 50,000 used daily. It's too much. And it's bad for you. But nevertheless, that's what I decided to do. 90 milligrams of zinc a day. Zinc is a carrier for all of these things. It's incredibly important to take zinc. And I don't know much about the dosings or whether there's limits or thresholds, but this is what we came up with. I was taking high dose vitamin C via IV, and they will tell you at the clinic what you're allowed to take, and they won't go over that. And so, and they'll do you a blood test, and they'll tell you what the dosing can be. I did have some side effects from that. There was more while it was happening, the pain in my kidneys. I was incredibly thirsty. It would take about an hour and a half or hour and 45 minutes to get the IV. And I was incredibly thirsty and I had significant pain and really felt kind of weird for a couple hours afterwards. And those were my side effects. I have had my kidneys checked since then, and they're functioning properly. So I'm okay with all of that. The one I can't say, artemisinin, 1,200 milligrams a day, for just 21 days. I didn't take it throughout. And there were some reasons for that. I took DMSO, meso silver. I took iron every day for just the 21 days. I took 4 pills 3 times a day with meals. I took probiotics because a lot of this kind of messes with your gut health. And then I took 60 milligrams of melatonin daily. And so that was my main protocol. We also had you can do some research on this. There was a guy who developed a guy named so I think he was a contemporary of like Tesla the back in those days, developed a frequency emitter, almost like looks like a well, there's several different ways to do it. You can put your feet in a sort of a tub, and it will pull out all the crap out of your body, kind of like a detoxy kind of a way, which is still to me mind blowing. I've got video of that, of all the it going from like clean water out of the tub, out of my bathtub pipes to thick dark ick. It's just amazing. But the main one that I did was on a grounding pad while I slept. It was a light emitting. I broke mine. They're very expensive, and God bless all of you, every single one of you that pitched in, Meg and Sam and Jenna, and I don't know after I broke it, but thank you for that. I did it, maybe not every day, but I did it pretty regularly. And so this was my protocol. On or about the time the protocol ended, I had an incident that happened in a Lowe's in Indianapolis. We were in Lowe's working, or excuse me, we were in Indianapolis working. We own a wireless business, and we were we had teams, several teams in Indianapolis installing these wireless solutions called Cloak Wireless. We were installing these Cloak Wireless solutions, and we ran out of Cat6 cable. And so we had bought most of, I guess, around Indianapolis and couldn't find any. So I found a couple of boxes at Lowe's, go into the Lowe's, and the guy's like, I don't think we have any. And I'm like, well, can you double check? He goes in, he finds it. It's underneath one of the big shelves, and he comes out with 2,000 foot boxes of Cat6 cable. And as I picked those up and was walking to the counter, no one still really knows what happened. I honestly don't think I died. There's some conversation amongst the paramedics and others that saw me that day, about whether or not I actually died for a brief period of time. Don't know, don't think so, but whatever. This was at the end of the protocol, and I like fell out on the floor in Lowe's. And of course, everybody comes running up and trying to call ambulances. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. Because by the time I got back up, I actually was fine. I'd gotten to the place where even me carrying 2 20-pound boxes of Cat6 cable was almost an impossibility to me. And I was in pretty bad shape, and I fell. And then when I sat up first, and then I realized that my back didn't hurt. I had a tumor kind of back here. My neck didn't hurt, and my hips didn't hurt, and my legs didn't hurt. And I didn't really understand what was happening. And then I disappeared for a couple of hours. And there's some confusion. There's some video of me in Lowe's. There's some video of me um, going into and out of one of these emergency care places. And but between walking out of that emergency care place and going to the location where they needed the Cat 6 cable was about a 2 hour gap, a 2 hour delta. And we know that I walked for miles. I walked like 15,000 steps, which is incredible, or at least my phone says I did, which is really incredible given that I couldn't really walk at all. And then I just showed up at this store where the guys were installing, but I wasn't hurting and whatnot. And by now, pretty much everybody was in a little bit of a panic about where are you? What's going on? And so I talked to Catherine a little bit, and I talked to the guys at the install team, and we decided to do one last store. Remember, I'm in Indianapolis. I live about half time in Texas and half time in Alabama. And it's about a 9 hour drive or so. But my plan was to just, I had a car inexplicably, but that's a whole nother topic. So I go to this next store where they were going to do an install, and and I and we immediately decided not to do the install. We've got to have there's got to be certain things available to us and certain distances to the roof that we can safely cover. And so we ended up deciding not to do that, but there's a way that they could do a little piece of it. They go indoor to do the install. And at some point I disappeared again and ended up in a parking lot of McDonald's, like a ways away from where this installation was. And I don't really eat McDonald's very much, so, or ever, but the food that I bought was still sitting in the bag next to me. I bought a Coke, which I don't drink Cokes anymore either. And it had been sitting there so long that all the ice had melted and everything. So I get out and I throw it out. And by now it's like 6:30 or 7 at night, I think. I really don't remember. But I'm in South Indy and I had to make a decision. What are you going to do? I get up, I go into the McDonald's to go to the restroom, and I realized that nothing hurt, that none of the pain that I had been experiencing was still there. But even more than that, I had a clarity in my mind. It was like all of that fog and all of that fusion and anger and lack of understanding about personal things, business direction. It was just so muddied in my mind and I couldn't make sense of any of it. And it was hurting our business and hurting all of our employees because of that. And I needed to do something. And so I pushed and pushed and pushed. And I end up in this McDonald's and I come back out to the car and I was wholly confused because I had the incident in Lowe's earlier that day. I disappear twice. I end up in a McDonald's parking lot of all places with no pain and a measure of clarity that I just felt the need to talk about. And some of the things that you're going to hear from us during the season is that clarity, because what we've been able to do since then is really take it and make sense of that and begun now to build things out. Like taking our data, for example, we have a lot of election related data that we've accumulated over the years. We just have a lot of data. And one of the things that was made clear to me was you need to create actionable capability on that. And so what we're doing is we're building a large language model around all of our election data. It's very exciting. I've had a few demos on the initial products, and while it has some work to do, I think I've written on Truth once or twice that this is the most incredible opportunity in my lifetime to be able to action on election data for and election intelligence and move. And it's very exciting. But that's just one of the things. The wireless company, we've had some epiphanies on. We have some projects that we're working on to create almost a tip of the spear pre-screening tool using some tech that we already had, along with a kind of an ecosystem of best in breed products from other tech players, and build sort of a tip of the spear pre-screening tool that ICE agents and other law enforcement can use from their phones to assess situations on the ground in person and make accurate decisions on whether or not this is a bad guy or this is just a regular person that we need to let go. And so we're doing a lot of things, and all of this came from that day in in Indianapolis. I got in the car after going in McDonald's and I started to drive. And I drove, it's a couple hours, I think, down maybe to Louisville. And so I thought, well, I'll just at least make it to Louisville. And then I'm like, okay, well now I'm doing pretty good. And by now I'm on the phone with Catherine and we're praying and reading the Bible and calling other folks and trying to interpret all this stuff. And how could this be? There's all sorts of references in the Bible to these kinds of things. Um, and we just prayed and worshiped and read the Bible. And God bless her, she stayed on the phone with me, not just India, not just Louisville, not just to Nashville, but all the way to Alabama. And we talked for 7 or 8 hours on the phone, just praying and worshiping and me explaining what happened over and over again and us trying to make sense out of it. And so we finally did. One of the other things that emerged from that is my friend that I keep referring to here, Bruce. I felt called to go see him, and not just go see him, but go and tell him that what had happened, and my calling was to just offer him help. He didn't need my help. He probably didn't want my help. But I literally showed up at his office on a Sunday afternoon, a couple of days after the Indianapolis thing, and just walked in and with my notepad in hand, and I had my computer and I had a pen, and I just went in and said, I'm ready to help. I'm ready to help you do whatever. And so we had a long talk about it and talked a little bit about kind of being half in and half out, and maybe that step into, another world that I may have done, and what does that mean to me, and how does that mean going forward, and kind of his interpretations of everything have been really helpful. So all of that kind of brings me to this summer. We've been kind of heads down working on so many things. We're focusing on, and I've tried to, as I've begun to kind of reemerge into the business and into everything. This podcast is one of the main things that I haven't done yet. One of the things that God made clear to me in Indianapolis that day was I need to start telling everybody everything. I need to start sharing all of the information I have. Don't keep it locked up in a black box back here in the back room or some server somewhere, and start sharing information and sharing our knowledge and sharing our capabilities and our expertise and things that we do really well. And that's part of what this podcast is. One of the other things that you'll hear a lot more about this year in season 3 of Patriot Games is a nonprofit that I have restarted. I'm going to do a whole show on this, so don't you don't have to worry too much about it. But back in 1993, I was working for a governor in Mississippi, Kirk Fordyce. I was a kid, I had no business, couldn't even run my own life, let alone the largest department in the state of Mississippi. But he appointed me there. We started something called Faith and Families. And the idea behind Faith and Families was we were sitting in his office on the 9th floor of the Walter Sillars building in Jackson, Mississippi, which is a beautiful building to kind of look out across at the Capitol, across toward downtown, not just downtown Jackson, but really West Jackson. It's really pretty, and canopy of trees with an occasional steeple sticking up. And he commented about how beautiful it was, that there was this beautiful canopy of trees out in West Jackson. Mississippi has the highest rate or the highest number of churches per capita in the nation. And he referenced that. And I said, well, what's interesting about this, I was running his like a health and human services department. And I said, well, what sort of belies all of that is underneath that canopy of trees is also the largest murder rate in the nation per capita that year. And it was really, really sort of startling to think about. And so we talked about it, and he's like, well, what can we do? And I said, well, look over here. Just over to our left was First Baptist of Jackson, huge, beautiful church, and covered a whole city block and then some. They had parking decks, they had daycares, they had everything. And the idea that we came up with that day with Faith and Families was that we were going to try to marry up the churches in like the First Baptist of Jackson with some of the churches like Stronger Hope Missionary Baptist Church out in West Jackson, where my friend Ron Moore was the pastor. It was a church that really didn't have a lot. They were just trying to get by, and their people were trying to get by. And so our idea was, rather than trying to, continue to foster these mission groups that were going out to either other states or out of the country, Our idea was to turn Faith and Families into a mission where our mission was to match the capabilities of First Baptist with the needs of the people in the stronger hopes of the world. That's how we started. And so it might have been something as simple as somebody over here has a mechanic shop, and somebody here needs their car fixed so they can drive to work, and they haven't been able to work because their car wouldn't fit. And these people might need a slot in the daycare so that this lady over here could go to work, and so on and so forth. It wasn't an official part of our work program back then, but we had started this thing called Work First. This is prescient today because the big, beautiful bill created, in essence, a work plan for Medicaid recipients. When I was the Commissioner of Health and Human in Mississippi, a group called the Department of Human Services, or my title is Executive Director, I guess. But our job was to, with a bill, a welfare reform bill that, interestingly, Roger Wicker, who is now a United States Senator from Mississippi, was the chairman of Public Health and Welfare at the time in the Mississippi Senate. And we all got together and came up with a senator named Mike Gunn, and I can't remember who all else, Representative Strickland. There was just a ton of people involved in this bill. Anyway, we got this bill passed. And the idea was that we were going to take their welfare payment, take their food stamps, take all their free things that they got, lump it into a wage and give it to or a piece of a wage and give it to an employer to employ that individual. So rather than them being stuck with $100 of food stamps, a few dollars worth of welfare, Medicaid, and whatever, actually get them a job and entice the employers to hire more people by supporting part of their wage with their welfare payment. That was the Work First program. It was incredibly successful. And as Congress has defined it currently, we're talking with Senator Katie Britt from Alabama. We're talking with other members of the Senate to really sort of get a clear understanding of intent and provide them with some of our knowledge and expertise and how to do these kinds of things. So Faith and Families, we've now reconfigured to Faith, Friends, and Family. We're going to be supporting those type of matching programs. We now call it Link. We began to do them years ago with disasters. So we would show up and link churches to churches and schools to schools and families to families and volunteer fire departments to volunteer fire departments and really make sense of people who wanted to give money in another part of the country. There's a hurricane in Louisiana, support them with like-minded people and a faith first step and be able to do that. We also train people in Friends and Family, train them how to use chainsaws, train them how to do some first response type work. And we're going to be working with some of the best groups on the planet that do that. There's a group out of Dripping Springs, Texas. You guys may remember me talking about them related to a prayer crusade in Nicaragua that went bad, Mountain Gateway. Britt and Audrey Hancock and their family run Mountain Gateway. It's a mission group, but they also train people how to do these kinds of things. So lots of fun and interesting things happening. We're going to be working in the work first type programs. We're going to be reconfiguring Faith and Families to Faith, Friends, and Family. We're going to be really working on our wireless stuff. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things. We have a healthcare tech company that we're sort of redeploying our tech. We've been in this business for 20 years or so. Have done 43 million cases, and there's some direct applicability between today's changes and where we need to go with waste, fraud, and abuse with work programs and the way that actually operates in terms of handling the pre-screening and screening of those applicants. So many great things happening. So many exciting things happening. Of course, we're going to be continuing to support from a technical perspective, support many of the amazing work that Catherine and True the Vote do. We're going to be really, really moving forward with that large language model, kind of think of it as sort of a ChatGPT-like thing for election intelligence. And so you're going to hear a lot more from us about kind of not just what the problem is and kind of piling on in a provocateur kind of way like so many people do on these podcasts these days. But we're going to try to define problems. We're going to bring in experts to talk about those problems. And we're going to talk about real world solutions, not not just, oh, I think we can save $2 trillion, but, real world solutions that talk about how you can realistically save 90 billion, or realistically do this, or realistically do that. And sort of a faith first project. We're going to be working in the disaster space pretty significantly. We're going to reinitiate the CPR side of faith and families and under faith friends and family. We're going to reinitiate the matching program and call it Link. We have another program underneath there called Lead, where we're going to be going out and leading with Christ around the United States and around the world with some of our work and our support. I'm so excited about season 3. I'm so excited that y'all have taken the opportunity to come back here today and listen to us. Beyond grateful to God. And again, this to me is obedience to him. I wrote a prayer after having a vision last week. And in that vision, I won't go too far into it, but it was walking through this beautiful park. And it was like a never ending park. There were no walking trails. There were no nothing. I was just walking on this beautifully manicured grass, and there were flowers. And it was like a spring day, and there were no other people. It was just me, and there were birds, and it was just rabbits. It was just beautiful. I mean, it was just like something out of a dream, but this was a vision of mine. And I walked and walked and walked and walked and walked and walked and walked. And finally I come to this big, beautiful stone, and over to the side of the stone, there was like a seat carved out in the stone. And that seat, I just felt called to go sit on it. And this is all in the vision. And as soon as I sat down on it, it's like I sat down into a cave. And so there was one light shining kind of in toward me like this. In that light was like an old time movie reel. And it started slowly, and it was showing all these people that I didn't know, poor people, and people that were in disasters, and people that were just needing help, needing food, needing water, whatever. And it started out in like an old time movie reel, black and white, and it was going really slow. And as I watched, it got faster and faster and faster, and more and more and more people coming into my view in the screen, and then the light was still up here. And as it went faster and faster, the light was starting to get kind of darker and more intense in the middle. And the light was focusing on me, but all I could see was just this screen in front of me. And as it continued to go faster and faster and faster, all of a sudden it stopped. And 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 when it stopped, I started coming back toward the light, still sitting in this or the light was coming toward me. And I could tell I was coming back toward the park, because I could see the green now. It was starting to open back up again, and I could see the green, and I wasn't in this cave anymore, or I was coming out of it. And the movie screen in front of me was no longer like an old black and white kind of a thing. It was more of it was more modern. It was really a, high def video. And I could see people that I knew, friends and family, and people that I've encountered over the last years. And, whether they're friends on True Social or elsewhere, people that I know asking for help and needing help, and needing something that maybe I could help, or that I could provide, whether it was through faith, friends, and family, or just me as a human being, and trying to do better and pray for folks. And as all of this kind of came and unfolded, suddenly I was back fully in the park. The cave was all behind me. I'm still sitting on the rock, and the air stilled, the birds quieted. There was still no one in the park. It was just me sitting on the bench, and my vision, the Lord's voice thundered, quote, "Do what I tell you to do. Do only what I tell you." So I sat down and I thought a lot about that. And I've talked to people that understand, faith leaders that understand these kinds of things. And there's lots to take away from it for sure. But I think the biggest thing that I took out of it, and that others have helped me understand, is obedience. When I walked on the Camino in 2019, it was related to obedience. I promised then and throughout all of this odyssey to God that if if you heal me, I'll come back and I'll walk and talk for 500 miles with you on the Camino. And I'll praise your name to everyone I encounter for the rest of my life. And the obedience that I feel to fulfill that promise is significant. So even though it's not really great timing, I've got a lot of things to do. I'm being called to do the Camino again and to fulfill my promise to walk and talk and pray with the Lord for that trip and during that pilgrimage. There's still a chance that there's something happening in my work world that may prevent this. But unless something changes, I'm going to go walk that 500 miles. I've got to be able to schedule my work around the walks and still be able to walk and talk with God. But I've got things to be able to be done. But anyway, I wrote a prayer that I'd like to share with y'all after all of this, and we'll kind of land the plane. And thank you again for coming back for another season of Patriot Games. I promise this will be the last one where I really ramble. But the good news is I'm able to ramble. And while some of it may have been a little incoherent, I'm getting better and better every day. The fog of the cancer and the protocols are leaving me a little bit more every day. And I just want to thank you and thanks to all of you that have prayed for me. I love you guys. I'm beyond grateful to all of you for what you've sacrificed for me and interceding with God. And it's made all the difference. It was sustaining while it was happening, and my heart is so full because of so many of you. And I just again I love you and I appreciate y'all so much. So let me sort of close up with this little prayer and look forward to the next big step and the next big episode of Patriot Games. Father, you called me into the quiet, seated me upon the stone of your choosing, and drew me into the place where light pierced the darkness. Faces appeared before me, some unknown, yet strangely familiar. Their pleas rose like a tide, their urgency pressed against my heart. Then came the faces I have known, friends, family, companions, from the road, and their eyes fixed on me, their need unmistakable. The reel stopped, the air stilled. A voice thundered. Your voice thundered. Do what I tell you to do. Do only what I tell you. I will walk where you send me, Lord. I will speak the words you place in my mouth. No addition, no subtraction, only obedience. Keep me steadfast in the path you've laid out. Strengthen me for the seat of responsibility you have prepared. Anchor me in the light when shadows surround. The journey is not finished. The end is not yet revealed. The command is clear. I will obey you alone. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we look forward to this coming season of Patriot Games.